Hey traders, welcome back to Valorizo Capital. On today's video, we're gonna go through the market update and also we're gonna take a look at some of the stocks that I'm gonna be watching for next week. The purpose of this video is to make sense of what is happening right now in the market. I do think that we're seeing some very important levels of potential support in the SPX. So I'm gonna share everything that I'm looking right now for that index. And then of course, guys, remember that this is based just on my personal opinion and is not financial advice. And if at any point you find any value on the information, remember to subscribe to the channel. So let's take a look at the SPX right here. And let's talk a little bit about what we were expecting last week, because last week, right, remember that last week's video, we were talking about the possibility of a bounce in tech. Right? That was literally the main theme of last week's video, and we actually see that bounce. Remember that we were talking about this anchor VWAP, anchor from this low right here, as a potential support in the Qs. We did see that bounce, right? We had a bounce into that declining 21 exponential and that 50 daily moving average, and then you can see that basically the market just continues its short-term trend to the downside. Now the question is, are we gonna see a completely crash in the markets? There is a lot of talk about the possibility of having a three-wave down in the markets, really similar to the situation that we had on 2023, right? So a lot of people are talking about the possibility of seeing this in the market. I do think that context is very important. All corrections, even though we can find some similar patterns in the past, everything stands on its own. And what I mean by that is that context is very, very important. Now, if we take a look at this correction, we can see, and let me show you with the rule here, we can see that this entire correction was an 11.76 correction, right? The thing is that this one happened pretty slow. Now, if we take a look at the correction that we're seeing right now in the Qs, you can see that we already exceed that. So right now, this is an 11.73 correction, so pretty similar in terms of value. And now the question is if this is going to continue. Now, of course, no one knows about that, so we have to see it and take it day by day. But I'm going to show you some things that I'm watching in the SPX. So let's take a look at the SPX first. So one very important thing about the SPX is the levels that we are testing right now. So I'm going to share with you some very important levels that I'm watching. So the first level is going to be in terms of Fibonacci. So if we take a look at the low right here to the high right here, you can see that this is going to be the 50% retracement in terms of Fibonacci. That means that we retrace 50% of the value of this entire rally. So that's going to be the first thing that I'm going to be watching. Now, the next thing that I'm going to be watching for this is going to be the retest of this base right here. So basically, the base that we formed on May for the rally of June, we are basically retesting that base right now. Now, if we take a look at the weekly chart, let's jump into the weekly chart. This is a very interesting thing about the SPX, is that in a really strong bull market, we tend to revert back to the weekly 21 exponential. So you can see that we had that reversion on April, and now you can see that we're having that reversion right now as we speak. So this is a pullback to that 21 exponential moving average on the weekly chart for the SPX. So now those are going to be four things that I'm going to be watching for support. And now the next thing that I'm going to be watching, let's jump into that daily chart again, is this very important level of gamma support right here. So this is going to be a 5,300 put wall. And let me show you why do I think that that's a very important level. So let's jump into quant data, which is the data that I'm using to find this information. So this is the chart for the SPX I'm using. Let me just change the color of my drawing tool. I'm using the August 16 expiration, so take that into consideration. I like using the monthly because I do think that that's very important for my swing trading strategy. And you can see this really gigantic spike at this 5,300 level. That means that there's a lot of interest at that level for potential support. So we already tested that level. We bounced and we closed somewhere around 5,350. So that's very, very important to notice. That's a level that we already tested, and that's a level that we're holding. If we happen to lose that level, then perhaps something else can happen. But for now, we do have to assume that bulls have an interest of that level holding. So basically, what I'm saying is that don't be surprised if we happen to see a bounce next week. Now, if we happen to see a bounce, does that mean that the pullback is over? Of course not. For the pullback to be over, or to at least have a high probability a scenario in which the pullback could be over, I do think that we need a daily close above this anchor VWAP, anchor from this high right here. So that will mean that we will need a really nice move to the upside in the SPX and a really nice close, perhaps above this 5,500 level. Now, something else that I do want to touch here is that the SPX continues to be in negative gamma territory. As long as we continue to trade up below this 5,500 level, there's a possibility that we will continue to see volatility. This basically happens because market makers tend to hedge in the direction of the move that we are seeing. That means that if the market starts to move to the downside, they're going to sell futures. So that's usually why we tend to see really big candles. And this is something that we were talking about last week. Now, this happens both ways. So if the market starts to move to the upside, don't be surprised if we happen to see really big candles to the upside. That in the environment that we have right now in the market, that could mean that market makers are just hedging. That usually does not mean that we're finding a lot of support. That's just how the market works on a negative gamma territory. So just keep that in consideration. Sometimes we tend to see this move to the downside, and then you can see literally shorts get smoked and get killed because we tend to see those really strong moves to the upside as well. So don't be surprised if we happen to see that. I wouldn't be surprised if we happen to see a really strong bounce all the way to that 5,500 level. So just keep that level in mind. So that's kind of my thesis going into next week. I do expect some kind of bounce, but it's very important to understand that if we happen to open below this level, we can see a really strong sell-off. So just keep that in consideration. Keep this level in your chart. That's going to be 5,300. And I don't think there's much to talk about, to be honest, guys. I think this chart is going to be the most important chart, which is the SPX. We can talk a little bit about the VIX, right? Huge spike all the way almost to 30. This continues to be elevated, right? There's nothing to do in the VIX. As long as we continue to trade above 20, I do think that the volatility can remain elevated, but I'm not using the VIX as much. I'm just watching as the SPX for clues. If we happen to see any validation for those levels, 5,500, 5,300, I think that's all the information you need. Now, in terms of stocks, I'm not looking to short. I do think the market is pretty extended to the downside, right? If we just take a quick look to the SMH, the SMH is in a bear market, right? This is more than a 20% move to the downside. I think this is what? This is 22, 25. Let's go to the top of it. This is a 24.34, so that's a bear market in the SMH. So I don't see a lot of value of looking for shorts right now. If anything, we will need a really sharp move to the upside and then perhaps shorting that move. But for now, shorting just looks like shorting in the hole. So one setup that I like is Apple. Of course, you have to take in consideration that the market right now is selling off. So there's a probability that this setup will fail. So that's very important to notice. But I like Apple here. Apple has been holding these levels. I don't like this close below the 21 exponential moving average. But if we happen to get a close above it, then we could see a move into this call wall that's 230, and then perhaps even a move to the upside. So this is one setup that I'm looking. And then the next one is going to be Meta. I really like the earnings reaction that we had. We moved back above this anchor VWAP. Now we're testing the anchor VWAP from the lows. So Meta is holding. Meta is holding the moving average, is holding this 21 exponential. Could we get a move to the upside to retest this 540? That could be possible. So those are the only two setups that I'm watching, guys. I do have a position in the IWM, I'm currently negative in that position. I bought this pullback to the 21 exponential. We had a continuation to the downside, and now we're testing this 50 daily moving average, which happens to coincide with this anchor VWAP. Let's see. We get a bounce. Most likely, if we happen to get a bounce in the market and we move back to this 21, I'm probably just closing that out. And then I'm just looking for not much, to be honest, guys. I think patience is really important right now. We have a lot of volatility going on. I think that the best thing that we can do is use the SPX as a compass for our decisions and just keep it light. Just keep trading pretty light for now. Better times to manage risk are going to come, so it's very important to protect both your mental capital and financial capital. So that's gonna be it for the video, guys. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. Take care and bye bye.